This week, we're going to be talking about writing press releases and blogs. The four main points we're hitting is formatting, headlines, best practices when writing these, and then some examples you can utilize when you start your assignments. First and foremost, press releases are to promote something significant or specific, but most importantly, clearly. This is for when businesses want to seek, media or organizations want to echo and promote a specific event or research topic or really anything they want to put out into the media. So this is normally to spark a story and inform those that write the stories. It's free publicity and it can result in published articles. Newspapers have an audience beyond our social norms, beyond our Twitter and our Facebook, our TikTok. Newspapers sometimes have a more serious crowd that could benefit from this type of serious reporting. It's cost effective because essentially what you're doing is you're putting all the information in and you're sending it in an email or a phone call to beat reporters in your area, essentially doing a portion of their job searching for them. And if they have an extra spot and they want to fit you into the news that day or that week, then you're giving them the story right in their hands. There is normally a release date on there, published date for the general public. Most press releases will say for immediate release, but we'll speak on some examples in just a moment that don't follow that norm. So there's two main styles for press release that I've seen in the industry. There's the first one where you're really giving them the information to write their own story. You can see the letterhead and logo at the very top, your media contact info if you are the person that's writing this. The headline is the most important part. Normally you're handing that to them. So if you can word it just the way you want to, sometimes they just use it for you. There's the deck, which is where we elaborate a little bit more on this topic, maybe put the hook within that deck so they know within the first few sentences what the story's about. The dateline, you'll see this a lot with newspaper articles. You can see right on the example, it says Redwood City, California, June 14th, 2016. Most newspaper articles start out when they're going to their publisher or their editor with that dateline. Who, what, where, when, and why is the questions we always want to answer with a story like this, so give it to them very clearly. A quote is normally preferred, especially in nighttime news. They like the word directly from the mouth of the people involved. Statistics are always a good backing, especially when you cite them, as this one's done. Do the U.S. Department of Labor. Just put in those significant sources and statistics. Credibility information is the second to last paragraph. It says, to develop the map, aspiring minds analyze more than 4 million job openings and match them with skill sets. This was done for the U.S. overall and by state. So this is just giving a little bit of background information that adds credibility to the story. And then at the very bottom, some key insights or statements that you might want them to make. This was especially popular near COVID in big venues such as the Dallas Mavs Stadium and the zoo. These key insights were the sentences that they really wanted in there, like tickets are now online or a mask is required. Formatting is normally, it's not far off what we're normally doing. It's 12-point font, professional, so those Times New Romans, Arial. It's single-spaced with no indentions, unless you're using these bullet points or using the indentions very specifically for a list underneath a statement. There's spaces between your paragraphs. It's short and sweet. As you can see, it's normally just one page, and it can include photos if relevant. Normally, those are attached as an email. There's another type of press release that I was normally doing, and this is essentially making the entire newspaper article and then just sending it with maybe the version A of the press release. So some people will just write it up and send it like this as if it were a newspaper article. Some people send both and just say, hey, I did the work for you if you want to use it. And some people just send the first one, especially if it's a beat reporter that they know and they've established a relationship with. So this is normally meant for online viewing, and it reads more like a news story. Most of the time, if they're going to feature you in the nightly news, they're going to want that version A where they can do their own story with their own quote. But if it's going on, the Star Telegram of Fort Worth online, this version normally doesn't doesn't normally cause any problems. So it has your name, your phone number, and your email address. If it's not on this, it's attached in the email so they know where to find you if they have any additional questions or maybe a quote. So news embargo is really neat, and we saw this a lot at the Fort Worth Zoo. News embargo is a date listed for release, and it's after the send date that the information was given to the media. For example, if we know we have a baby giraffe coming up, or we know there's going to be a big announcement at the zoo, we'll get them ready most of the time and send them the press release in advance, but there's a lot of headlines of news embargo. This is the advanced release date. This is when we would like it reported. However, be careful because it's not a legally binding contract. So as soon as these news stations get the information, they can release it. And I think we see this often with tragic instances. I can think of a few celebrity passings throughout the year that maybe the news popped out before really information was given from the family or authorities. And so if it's a really hot topic, again, there's no contract that's binding them to do this. But for these smaller, more exciting event things, especially if you've created a good relationship with some of these beat reporters in town from your organization, or even, that personal one that you have to create over time at a new job, normally they'll respect your wishes with the news embargo. So it's a little blurry, but headline should tell the crux of a story, or just at least a main and central feature. It should include all the major elements of the story. You don't want to leave any huge portions of it out. Provide the hook, and it's okay to be clever, but it's not okay to be tricky. And we see this a lot with controversial topics, but let's just look at a silly one. It says, Florida man kidnaps scientist to make his dog immortal. That's the main crux of this story. It's a little clever, I guess, but I can think of some ways we would do it. And in a normal semester, we would have an in-class activity where we would create our own headlines. But if you're viewing this virtually, funny headlines are pretty fun to search. Pinterest is a good source for some more wholesome ones. Some examples of a headline is, veterans, caregivers find new direction at a dog tag bakery. New BarkBox study finds that humans lean on their pups to get through the holidays. I know I do. So the deck is a sub-headline right below the headline that describes it in a little bit more detail. So it may say, new study shows 72% of U.S. adults surveyed identified, New study shows 72% of adults surveyed identified bad mobile phones behavior as one of their top pet peeves, but only 18% admit to engaging in it. So you can normally look at a deck and write a headline, but this is where the detail is in. So it's hard to see a headline, and then write a deck from that, just because we need this additional information to make the story make sense. Dateline, I love crime shows, so it's one of my favorite, but we're talking about the dateline that would be in a press release. It's just that release date and originating city like we saw, and it immediately continues into the intro after that dash, after the date. The close is traditionally the 30 symbol, and I don't know where that came from, but it appeared after the boilerplate indicating to media that the release had ended. So now we use what we call the hashtag, but the pound symbol 3 times at the very bottom of a press release normally means this is it. There's no more second page. So there are some video news releases, and these don't always have to be so informational. It's just a video segment to look like a news report, but it's created normally by a PR firm, government agency, or sometimes the organization that you're working for. And so these are 2 from the Fort Worth Zoo. They're linked in the watch folders this week. If you're interested in seeing them, there's a Texas Nature Traders, and then there is more of a fun kind of press release we did during COVID where we took an animal around the zoo and we had them meet other animals. And so it got a lot of attention in the news when people were looking for more of a wholesome turn from that. So it was good public relations for us. It was good attention to our organization, and it was free. These are normally provided directly to TV newsrooms, and sometimes, most of the time, they have a purpose. They shape public opinion, they promote a product or service, publicize individuals like politicians, or support other interests. But especially when you have a business whose portion of their purpose is entertainment, you can get away with a little bit more fun stuff. So those will be on the website. So let's talk about distribution. Often, the entity releasing information to the media hires a publicity agency to write and distribute written information. These self-published press releases are normally created in-house. And so there's either a public relations agency, and sometimes you'll see this with smaller businesses who don't feel like the payment that they're making for a full-time public relations person is in their budget, and so they'll hire an outside agency, and those are very efficient. But sometimes when you want someone on hand, someone you know that can show up at 6 a.m. for an event, they'll do these in-house public relations agents and employees, and so sometimes they will self-publish one from in-house and send directly to local newspapers. And you always send it to the beat reporter. This is the one that is looking for news stories. There's some reporters that are very specific in the topics that they cover, and then some of the new reporters are normally beat reporters, which they just go out and find stories, and so they often, if they're not busy, love it when one just pops in their email. So we always follow up after the release has been sent to make sure they don't have any questions, or maybe to ask if it's going to be put on the nightly news so we know. And remember, again, with the contractual thing, your release doesn't have to be published. So you could send it to 10 beat reporters, and if there's a big wreck the next day, or heaven forbid something happens with the weather, often that's going to be their primary focus. And so you are not always guaranteed a publication, even if you have a really good public release. So let's switch over to blogs, because after we turn in our how-to project, this is what's next on the agenda. Blog is an abbreviated version of weblog, which is a term used to describe websites that maintain an ongoing chronicle of information. And this is definition. This is the definition, but I think there's lots of random blogs that just come up that are one-hit wonders, like we say with songs. And so a blog features diary-type commentary and links to articles on other websites. So linking is very important, especially when we come back to sources and information. And it's usually presented as a list of entries in reverse chronological order. And so you think, when you go to a blog's website, you normally see the newest blog first, because that's what you're going for. So here's some best practices when we're looking at writing a blog. We're going to keep the language simple. We've talked about jargon. We've talked about encoding versus decoding, and some of the words and language that we use in science versus scientific communication. And so we're going to keep that simple in case people that are really interested in our topic but not maybe immersed in the industry that it's about can still understand and recognize the importance. Post regularly, especially if this is something that you're looking to do long term and really build an audience for. We're going to show and not just tell. I think this little aesthetic that we have placed on the screen right now is very normal of blogs. That aesthetic and those images and the graphics that they use are almost just as important as the words. Know your audience, and we'll talk about audience analysis a little bit later in the semester. I want us to focus first on a topic and how to write a blog, and then we will go into more detail from there. We want it to be interesting and relevant, news-worthy things, something that's happening in the now is a popular blog topic, but as long as it's interesting, I don't think it necessarily has to be, the timing has to be new. Use vocabulary that the audience knows, and be conversational, but also be concise. This is something that y'all have probably been involved with at some point, reading a blog for classes or maybe for fun, and so you know what you like. Make sure to implement that in your own writing. When we're looking at layout, we have our intro. Normally, we have the hook. If it is, we call this an argument, but the crux of your topic, we have our body, and we have our conclusion. And so we're going to look at a couple of examples of different types of blogs, but remember this type of layout of any blog you have, you're going to want to see a title, right? That's what's clicking you into that interest. You want maybe a few intro sentences, maybe even an intro paragraph to prepare you for the information ahead, especially if it's something scientific. So an intro paragraph is always nice. A hook is optional, but I think that it can be a really quirky way to lead them into your body paragraphs. And those body paragraphs are what's going to differ in our examples, but we should always have a conclusion, maybe a summary and a food for thought, or even an action item. Hey, make sure you subscribe to my blog. It comes out every week. These are things that you can implement into your writing, especially if you want to use this opportunity to write something for your own blog or your own website. So linking is very important. We see in academic writing, and we will look at peer-reviewed research articles soon, but there's a way online where you hyperlink your source or your citation to a phrase or a photo. And so hyperlink is an option on Microsoft Word. So when you do quote these statistics or you quote someone from an organization, I want you to include that hyperlink in a way that you think fits. So I don't necessarily think you hyperlink the whole quote, right? But you say, a new study demonstrated that, or according to USDA, and you hyperlink USDA to that website so that if anybody's interested, they can go and find out that information. This has keywords and tags, so if someone's Googling your topic, this is where your blog pops up in those Google searches, and makes it have a high searchability rate. So scannable, we're all guilty of a very short attention span. We've spoke about this before. We want to chunk that information with subheads and keep sentences and paragraphs short. List items or bullets sometimes are helpful. And, chunk information with subheads twice. It's a very important topic you need to know. Make sure it's scannable. And we're about to dive into some examples of how you can make that happen. So headlines is the only way you're going to get people to click on your blog. So keep it short, deliver on your promises that you make in your headlines, and then pick a style. Some of the styles you can pick, mix and match, or even maybe include some of both. One of the first examples is numbered. So 20 social media don'ts, 45 ways to avoid using the word very. And then this is a blog from the Alliance for Science. It's 10 myths about GMOs. So you can see they have this intro paragraph, and maybe you could call it that hook, but before they lead into one of the top myths about GMOs. And so you can see when you have, let's say, 500 to 700 words in this blog to write, if you number it 1 through 7, then you're really only having to write 100 words about 7 topics, and it becomes a little bit more manageable to create information that's interesting and still relevant to what you're wanting to share. So adjectives and adverbs are also included into these, and I think we just have a normal human interest in some of these words. 30 ultimately effective social media tools for writers, 5 incredibly simple ways to help writers brainstorm, or one of the most bizarre animals on earth. We love these like topic, hot keywords, and again, you don't have to use all of these. You could use one of these. If you were having an idea outside of this box, you could create something entirely different, but these are just some ideas to help get you started with a headline once you pick your blog topic. So time, how to plot a perfect scene in 10 minutes, how to plan your blogging week in less than 15 minutes, or what I am about to go look at after this, how to write a book or finish any big project in 30 minutes at a time. So these are more instructional type blogs. There's a how-to, a when-to, and a why. How to write a one-page synopsis, or what watching Disney taught me about writing suspense. This is from goodness, I think this was from the UK CDC type site. How to prepare and cook food safely. This is mainly during COVID, but they have this little hook line, you see. Find out how to prepare, cook, and store food correctly to minimize the risk of food poisoning, including E. coli. And you could prepare or compare this to a public release in the terms of headline, and then that would be your deck. That would be your subhead right there. So you could always ask the question, heroes and anti-heroes, what's the difference? Or this is from Illinois Farm Bureau. Ask a farmer, what do farmers do in the fall? And this is more of an interview, which is interesting, but I would rather you work in terms of your own language and your own ideas just for this blog post. But it's definitely an idea of a type of blog to do. Now, you could always ask a question for this blog post and this assignment, but I want the answers to be from you rather than in an interview style. So what I want you to do for next week, remember the how-to projects due this week, but for next week, I want you to brainstorm a topic. Come up with something that's science-based, and you'll see why in a moment. Avoid broad topics. So instead of saying, okay, I like horses, I'm going into animal science, I want to talk about horses, maybe look into equine therapy, or look into a specific way that horses are still utilized on cattle farms. But don't limit yourself to being too specific. So instead of saying, I want to look at irrigation farming and corn, I think that's really awesome, but especially for this blog post, maybe try, West Texas farming trends or something that will give you a little bit more wiggle room. Because for this blog check post, this blog checkpoint assignment, goodness, choose a topic, scientific, interesting to you, and approval grants access to the blog post assignment. So once we say, yeah, this checkpoint topic looks great, that's when you're going to get granted access to the blog post assignment. So if you're running late or whatever, points still stand in terms of how we've graded throughout the semester of late work. But even if you wait until Tuesday, the Tuesday after this is due, that blog post assignment will not be open to you until you finish this blog checkpoint assignment. And this checkpoint is just a paragraph. All I want to see is a sentence, something that you are going to choose for the rest of the semester in these projects. I want a topic. That's because, let's look at what's coming next. We have our how-to project that's due on March 13th. That's this coming Saturday. And then we have the blog checkpoint, which is 25 points. So you will give us a topic, a scientific topic that you're really interested in, that you would like to continue throughout the entire semester. And we will say, yes, this looks great. Or we might send it back and say, hey, maybe double check this. Or what if we tried this instead? You can always email us. But that blog will be due on March 27th from that topic. So we're looking at a blog topic and a blog post, which seems simple enough. But let's say we go back to the example that I was using for equine therapy. Let's say, I want to look at equine therapy for my blog checkpoint. And we say, fantastic, let's get started. You will write your equine therapy blog post. And this doesn't have to be necessarily 10 ways that you can do equine therapy. But that is an example of something in a blog that you might want to do. You can look for inspiration in other industries to apply to your industry, but we are looking at a blog post from this topic. After that, we're going to have an article checkpoint. So we want you to find a scientific peer-reviewed article about the topic that you chose for your blog post. That's why I want you to keep it kind of scientific and maybe just a little bit loose in case we couldn't find a specific topic of thoroughbred horse equine therapy. Maybe we just talk about equine therapy in other countries. Maybe that's the peer-reviewed article that we found. And so keeping your topic broad enough that you'll have wiggle room to find a scientific article is important. But we're finding one scientific topic, we're writing a blog post, we're finding a peer-reviewed academic research article, which I'll teach you how to do next week. Then we're going to write an audience analysis of what are the kinds of people that might enjoy this topic? What do they look like? What do they do? Where do they live? What kind of language could we use in relation to these people interested in your topic? And then you will have your article evaluation due. So in that article checkpoint, you're going to send us a citation for an article. You're essentially just going to send us the information of the author and where it is, and we're going to double check that it's peer reviewed for you so that you don't hit your assignment and get a 0 because it doesn't meet the standards. So we're putting these checkpoints in to make sure you're on your way to success. So the article evaluation, whatever article you found, you'll evaluate in the form that we teach you how to do. And then our last assignment for the class will be a social media schedule. So you'll write maybe 10 to 15 social media posts about this topic. Twitter posts, Pinterest posts, Instagram, Facebook, it doesn't matter. But that will be that last assignment. So you will have that option to take the final exam at the very end of this semester. It is 100 points. So as of this week, week 8, you still have 660 points available, and that's if you haven't done the extra credit assignment. And so there's still there's almost an entire C left in this class. And so if you feel like you've been behind or you haven't felt confident in your grades this far, there's some big point opportunities coming. So please take advantage of them. So for the blog, let's just go over it real quick. The instructions are on Blackboard. You're going to create a 500 to 700 word blog. It's due at 11:59 on March 27th. There needs to be at least 2 to 4 photographs or graphics in your blog post. These either need to be original or cited and relevant to the post. So if you see right underneath this photo of the shrew, it has photographed by William Stanley, the Field Museum of Natural History. So whether you wanted to type that underneath and hyperlink it or just type it underneath, if you are using a photo or graphic from Google, it needs to be cited where that's coming from. Google is not an organization entity that owns these photos. They're just linking you to their source. And so we need that source in your blog post, and we need 2 to 4 photographs or graphics. These can be infographics. This can be the logo if you're looking at a company. This can be, we looked at aspen trees and last week, and we looked at that graphic that showed you how to put product into the roots. And so if you're looking at more of an instructional type blog post, that might be of use. And then I want you to use good sources and cite in the links like we talked about, that hyperlink. Base your information off relevant sources, including but not limited to the topic of the journal article you are promoting. So if you wanted to go ahead and get your topic approved and go ahead and find a journal article that you feel like fits into the theme of your topic and the qualifications for the semester, you're welcome to cite that academic article in your blog post as a credible source and maybe get started on understanding it for your evaluation. So this week we have our week 8 quiz. Remember, if you are looking at this online, you will have your grammar lesson PowerPoints in this virtual week folder. It's due on Saturday by 11:59 p.m. So is your how-to project. Remember, it's either a video or a podcast, so really get on that. We have our read, watch, do folders, and then we have that blog checkpoint next Saturday. But if you already have a topic in mind based on your career or your schooling, go ahead and turn in that checkpoint and get it approved so you already have access to that assignment. As always, if there's any questions, you can email me. And I hope you have a great week.